Hi and welcome everybody. My name is Ember Kelly. I'm the Director of Religious Education here at the Fourth Universalist Society. I use she and her pronouns, and I am so excited. This has been an amazing month of exploring uh, all sorts of topics as related to religion and socialism, and it has been amazing just seeing a variety of different topics and totally different perspectives, and I've just really appreciated that. All of these are saved and shared on our YouTube, so if you did not make it to the other conversations, you can hop on our YouTube and you can uh, find out a little bit more about some of the other past presentations. But we had Buddhism and socialism. Um, we had about organizing. We've had a variety of conversations, and it's been wonderful. And I am so excited for this final conversation about loneliness, capitalism, and religion with Rafael Diaz. And I feel blessed that Rafael was able to join into our programming and get involved with this. So Rafael, I will turn, oh wait, I suppose I should clarify that we will have a Q&A time at the end. So we are recording, the recording is just of the speakers, and then we will turn off the recording and we will post that recording later to YouTube, but um, we will then have our Q&A time not recorded and with people having a chance. So that will be at the end of the presentation. And if you join us later on YouTube, we're glad that you also joined us later on YouTube as well. So now, Rafael, I will turn over to you.
Woo! Thank you so much, Ember. And I am definitely feeling real blessed myself just to have been asked to participate through my homie Ben over at Union Seminary and Fourth U, and Ember, who's brought me in to contribute to this series. So once again, my name's Rafael Diaz. My pronouns are they, he, and I am currently enrolled as a student at Union Theological Seminary in the Buddhism and Interreligious Engagement Program. I am studying and practicing to become a chaplain. Currently chaplaining within my Sangha, Bhumisparsha, and I practice, I'm kind of like a multiple belonger in some ways with different religious traditions, but over the last few years, I've firmly found my home in Vajrayana Buddhism through my teacher, Lama Owens, and support of the Sangha. And the incense smoke is a bit more intense in front of the camera than I expected, but I appreciate the vibe regardless. Um, so yeah, just a quick, I'm going to start us off with a practice, but just the quickest rundown of how I hope this conversation will go tonight is essentially I'll be reflecting on my experience of being an community organizer down here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This is my hometown. I've lived here since I was in second grade, still do. Formed an organization called Lancaster Stands Up in 2016. Um, and yeah, and through that story, through the journey I had with um, burnout and exhaustion and just hitting wall after wall in the struggle to build socialism, found my path veering towards spirituality and religion. Um, and through the particularities of my story, I hope that y'all can draw out things that are analogous or mirror some of your experience. Um, and yeah, I guess, pretty much gonna paint a picture of starting with talking about Marx's essay, Estranged Labor, which is one of my favorites. Talk about alienation and loneliness under capitalism, and how much spirituality and religious practice in particular, which we'll talk more about what that means, uh, can really help us cut through alienation and I see this as an attempt to merge these two poles of spiritual liberation and political liberation, um, and bring those together and show that maybe they're not on opposite ends of a spectrum at all. If they're a Venn diagram, I think they'd be more like one circle. If you're really doing either right, IMO. But yeah, let's just start out with a practice. I invite y'all just to get into position that just feels appropriate to your body, whether you are sitting or laying down, on a chair, on a cushion, truly does not matter. Just whatever feels right for you in this moment. And take a deep breath out. I invite you to notice and just become aware of the sensation of your body making contact with your seat, how the seat is holding you up right in this moment, and become aware of your feet touching the ground or your seat or bed touching the ground, and how the earth is effortlessly rising to support you, just naturally being there and offering itself to you, grounding you. And I invite you all to join me in building what we're going to call a homecoming circle, just inviting different entities or beings from our lives to sort of just like visualize them being in the space with you. Um, and first, just start with um, inviting your teachers and your guides to be in the space with you, living or dead, whether you've met them or not, just beings and figures that have helped support you in times of suffering and helped point you on the way towards freedom. Just offering up this intent and space to invite their presence to join you, maybe visualizing them sitting around you if there's specific figures that come up. And next, following your teachers and guides, I invite you to come home to your wisdom texts, sacred or secular, written or oral, or any medium, music, art, film, anything in this wide definition of text that has guided you towards freedom, supported you in your suffering. And following your teachers and guides and your wisdom texts, invite in your communities. And this doesn't have to be limited to space and time. It can be communities of religious socialists, communities that you spend time with and feel support from, groups where you feel loved and free to offer that love back. Inviting your communities to join you. Next, invite you to come home to your ancestors, whether by blood or otherwise, those that you feel kinship ties to, and notably, the ones that you feel share your desire for liberation and freedom. With my ancestry, that I think involves both enslaved people and slave owners, most likely. It's complicated. So just inviting those ancestors who share your wish for freedom have the capacity and space to support you right now. Your ancestors joining this homecoming circle of your teachers and guides, your wisdom texts, and your communities. Maybe imagining them sitting around you and offering the energy of love and support. And next, come home to the earth itself, its energy of groundedness and solidity, of firmness, yet flexibility, that which offers life and love to you through the air we breathe, the food we eat, coming home to earth. And next, come home to silence. If there's noise around you, perhaps just acknowledging the silence in between and around the sound. Silence, this great facilitator, which gives birth to form and speech and ideas, action. Coming home to silence. And last but certainly not least, invite yourself to join your homecoming circle, the being engaging in this practice, who is made up of all of these different elements and influences that we just named. Perhaps imagine yourself sitting in the middle of this circle of all of these great beings surrounding you, your teachers and wisdom texts, communities, ancestors, the earth and silence, just offering you an energy of care and love right now in this moment. As we begin to close this practice, imagine these beings dissolving into motes of light, and this light being directed straight into your heart center. As you breathe in, you feel it sinking into your skin and flesh and bones, to your cells and atoms, the space in between, fully absorbing this presence and energy of love, knowing that you carry it with you even outside the bounds of this practice. Perhaps offer some gratitude or thanks to these beings that came when called. And thanks to the mystery when there may have been gaps or space in between. And invite you to bring your awareness back to the sensation of your body making contact with your seat. When you're ready, bringing back some gentle movement to your body. Maybe stretching your neck or rolling your shoulders. And when you're ready, feel free to open your eyes. Cool. So, hello and welcome once again. Thank y'all for joining me and bringing your homecoming circles with you. I shared that practice specifically because I think it's a real example of what I hope we're going to get at through this conversation, which is how spiritual practice and spiritual work, even in more practical contemplative realms, which is really where I live in my Buddhist practice, um, isn't need not be a solitary affair. And it's truly something that connects us in really deep ways to all of reality that we've been disconnected from, not just through modern post-industrial capitalism, but perhaps through modernism itself, unseen worlds, ancestors, spirits, um, and how this sense of connection, this sense of groundedness to the earth, to to the wisdom of our teachers and our texts, how connecting to that grounding, I think, is really vital for doing the work of liberation. whether it's explicitly political, um, or more implicitly political in other ways. So, when I was asked about this and knew that I wanted to talk about loneliness and alienation, not just coming out of my own experience, it made me think of this essay by Karl Marx, Estranged Labor. And I first read this when I was an undergrad in 2011 or something like that. And it is just like so prescient and sort of predictive of, I think, the dilemma that so many of us find ourselves in. It just his really stuck with me for this day. And essentially, his argument is that the capitalist mode of production um, is built on disconnection and alienation because of the ways that property relations are built, how we work at jobs, where we don't own the capital, if we work at a coffee shop, we don't own the espresso machines, we don't own the front counter, and we don't earn or own the profits. We just get, a tiny segment of it, and we're really trade disconnected from our labor and trading it for a wage. And the things that we make and that we produce, whether it's lines of code, whether it is teachings in elementary school, or it's engines at the Harley Davidson factory a few miles away from me. Um, we don't own those things either. Um, the our boss owns them, right? Sells them for a profit. Um, and this has some real consequences. This disconnect from something so like vital and fundamental to humanity, which is just our own labor, our creativity, the creative act itself, um, and our connection to material reality. He talks about how disconnected we become from nature because of this, and see it as this complete externality, as this commodity, perhaps that has nothing to do with us, that isn't. There's this Thich Nhat Hanh quote I read this week that blew me away, which is just like, trees are our like essentially trees are our outside lungs. Like those are our lungs out there that we're cutting down. This sort of intimate connection um, with the rest of the world, and it really disconnects us from each other. And I think society's borne this out in a lot of ways. We've seen that the internet, in all of the ways that it may have connected us, how connecting us right now in this call, it's clear how disconnected it's made us with the prevalence of just social media, of mass harassment, um, of just the feeling that we get when we scroll Instagram, when we scroll Twitter, and get down on ourselves or angry at others, angry at ourselves for whatever reason it may be. These platforms that are built off of these strong reactions, often of rage or jealousy. Um, with the ways that we've become a car-centric society, that we, are all in these disconnected, like lumps of metal, careening down a highway at terrifying speeds, completely abstracted to one another, and don't have collective places to to connect and be together. No, like very few civic societies, very few clubs, union halls. If you want to hang out with people, meet new people, you go to a bar, which for many of us, me included, just doesn't work. Um, the pandemic, through quarantine, all these different things. But this long story short, we're in this like deeply fragmented society, and in this space where I think the loneliness is profoundly affecting so many of us and killing us, and sowing just seeds of distrust among people who have some real strong like seeds of solidarity that they could be cultivating, that we could all be cultivating. And I remember when I started our community organization here in Lancaster, it was like this revelation when we first had our very first mass meeting. A few weeks after Trump got elected, 250 people show up to this meeting. And this, I've lived in this county all my life, read evangelical, all of these different things, hyper just isolating, being a, you know, Puerto Rican kid who, with the values that I started forming and developing, and queer friends, being anti-war, you know, it was this place never really felt like a home until that meeting where all of a sudden I saw like, oh shit, there's at very least 250 plus people, however many, right here in this room who have enough in common about the ways we've suffered and the ways we want to be liberated, that like we're gathered here together right now. And then through canvassing and knocking doors, realizing, just cutting through these lies of that mass media, that the internet, that so many things have sort of fed to me about these people, about how we should be afraid of one another, and how no one here shares the same values that I do, so why even try? Which, of course, is a perfect recipe to let the GOP and other fascist elements just run roughshod over your communities. Just throw up your hands, but well, I guess they outnumber us. It's like, no, they just out-organize us. Um, so the thing is, these disconnections emerge from structural factors. Structural racism, from capitalism, these deep embedded institutions and ways of being, ways of running society that continue to perpetuate this disconnection, this alienation, this exploitation that we see all the time. Um, so of course, the organizer, the socialist, asks like, okay, so let's address these structures head on. Let's not just shift the deck chairs on the Titanic. Let's build a different ship. We need a revolution at least to overturn these structures and institutions and to build the world we want. But my story is just like, okay, so what happens if you do try to address that head on? And in my case, a lot of good got done, but I look back and in many ways, I'm surprised that I'm even still here to talk about it. Organizing throughout the Trump era, especially as a new organizer, was an obscenely challenging grind and roller coaster. Constant overwork and burnout. The stakes just felt so high all the time, and Trump was dropping new horror after new horror, and my organization within my own organizing, like so many other people at the time, were just like dancing to their tune, super reactive, getting out on the streets, mass mobilizations every single time some shit happens, without paying close enough attention on really cultivating and developing this base of new people that we were bringing in with political education, with leadership skills, and certainly not developing specific long-term strategic campaigns to really, get what we wanted. Um, I look back on my personal work over 4 years, and I just feel like there's so much little I have to show for it. I think a lot of groundwork or scaffolding foundations were developed that a lot of talented people are bringing forward. But the for about 2 of these years, I was organizing in a town an hour away from me that I'd never been in my life before organizing, and it sounds so much worse when I say it out loud now, doesn't it? Um, and really built up like a beautiful like core group of people there. We started developing like a cash bail campaign to end cash bail, all these different things. Um, but that chapter of the organization no longer exists. We had gotten someone on city council without the support and continued just guidance that she needed. She's no longer on city council. And it just feels like a lot of like what was built just got tossed to the wind. And granted, the trigger point was the pandemic, um, which for me, actually, I think, at least in regard to this work, was like a savior, a clarion call, just really like telling me like you're not going to push past this wall. You can't keep crashing. caught in these patterns of you know 2 or 3 weeks of like intense overwork and exhaustion, then I would maybe like get the thing done, have like the meeting that felt so high stakes, and then be completely wrecked and ruined for like 2 weeks, unable to put things, put myself back together because I just exhausted myself too much. And back on the treadmill in the cycle over and over again. Um, and even when I was like making some pretty deep and intimate connections with folks and getting things moving, the sort of accolades that I felt fall on my shoulders from mentors, from other organizers, from my own leaders, just fell on deaf ears all the time because I thought just like it's not fucking good enough. Um, this is what we got, but this is what we wanted. All of these different things that clearly just like wasn't making it sustainable for me. And the last straw was essentially when the pandemic hit. Um, we decided to switch our ending cash bail campaign to a rapid response campaign, to free people, elders especially, from the Chester County Jail, fearing and knowing that there would be a severe outbreak that would jeopardize the lives of those people who were inside. Um, and spent about a week, 2 weeks, just putting all of this work on my own shoulders, not effectively delegating or asking for help, and really just not having the resources to get what needed to be done in the period of time we were looking at. And we sent out this letters of demand, stuff like that. Then one morning, I just woke up and I was finished. I couldn't even send a single email. Um, couldn't do a check-in text, check-in call, couldn't reschedule things. It was just like nothing was happening. And this was a pattern that had happened once again, like over and over. This really tough spot of just like, I know what I have to do. I know I can do it. It's actually quite easy. I'm just call this list of people that I'm trying to turn out for this meeting, remind them, see if they're going to come, whatever. But like, there's a gap between my brain and my body. I just couldn't do these things that I knew were easy. They were impossible. And when the pandemic hit, that truly was, you know, I was down for the count and knew I needed to do something else. And the one space where I found respite, especially in the last chaotic year and a half, was actually through cultivating spiritual practice. Um, since I was in high school, when I started tripping on acid, learning more about plant medicine, I started falling into like, learning more about Buddhism, Hinduism, particularly from like the Western white imports of those faith traditions. Um, and it was something I was interested in, but very rarely actually sat my ass down to do. Just very in my head, okay, am I sitting up straight? Am I doing this? Oh, I'm not paying attention to my breath. I'm so horrible. All these different things. But the intensity of my work just really called me back to trying this out. Was with a Zen group and talked with the sensei there, and he essentially was like, yeah, if you're serious about this, practice every day for 3 weeks and come back. I did the practice for 3 weeks. I did Zazen, and it made my life so much better. Um, but then I went on like a vacation that interrupted things. I never came back. Later, a few months later that same year, my cat died, and it was really fucking hard for me. And I decided to check out this pilgrimage site actually 10 minutes outside the town I was working in, the Mazar, which is like a Sufi mausoleum, or Muslim mausoleums for a Sufi saint of Baba Mujahideen. And I would, roll up there after an insane day of phone calls and spreadsheets and writing for press releases or whatever the heck else it was, Canvas plans, Canvas scripts. And I'd perform wudu and go, into the mazar, and I would practice, meditate for a few minutes, and sometimes I just burst out into tears or burst out into laughter. Still remember this one particular time where I just like burst out laughing There's like tears running down my face, and it's just like, why? What? Who cares if no one shows up to this next meeting? If it's like literally just Terry, my trusted leader who rocks, right? We'll look at each other and be like, well, this didn't work out the way we wanted. And then we'll reset and figure out what we need to do. But I just had this apocalyptic thinking I was bringing into everything, which was so deeply rooted in just my past traumas and habit patterns. Um, of like the ways I was raised, taught to be a perfectionist in school, get good grades or else the fucking sky is gonna fall on you. Um, and really noticing just the extent to which my organizing, my fight for change and liberation was driven by like outrage and outright rage, which just wasn't sustainable. My life was falling apart as I'm just like zooming along on this momentum of resentment and bitterness for what Empire did to me, those I love in my communities. Which is a very important feeling to make visible and touch into, but it proved to just be really toxic in the end. It's like extractive, it was like fossil fuels, it was taking shit out of me and then poisoning me as a result, is what it feels like. And once again, like I had all this like political knowledge, all these things of not just these like step by step like things I know need to do and can do, like send out the phone calls, do this and that, but like this more broad theoretical knowledge um, of how to do the work of liberation. But that knowing was completely disembodied. It was all in my head, and even though I knew things like, okay, we have to pace ourselves, I need my people to take breaks and take care of themselves, we're going to do this sustainably, that shit never applied to me. I never let it apply to me. Instead, I was just like breaking myself down over and over. And, for me, the sacred and religious practice really was a road back home. It wasn't just Buddhist meditation or zikr practice later at the Mazar, um, which is like a Muslim chanting practice, recitation, remembrance of God. It was also Christian contemplative prayer at a local Episcopal church, where we would just, um, you know, uh, essentially do a chant of like a Bible verse at the beginning, then follow our breath or just internally repeat Maranatha, Aramaic for "Come, O Lord," inviting Spirit to join the space that we opened up with us. And these practices were just like so rejuvenating, especially at a time where just about everything I was doing was draining. And I was coming back home to my partner just exhausted, not fun, not willing to have fun, just in full recovery mode, but never actually recovering. And this was my path back out from what I perceive as alienation, which for me manifested as these ideas of just like this is all on my shoulders. I have to work extra hard, and grind myself down to the bone. I'm going to do this work. Um, Alienation from my body, from like the experiences that I was having inside myself, of just this emotional and physical turmoil throughout the whole time, not listening to my body, thinking that like, oh, is there something wrong with my like lungs or with this or that's it? No, you're panicking, Raf. You're having anxiety attacks. Not knowing how to listen to my body and my body's needs. I'm vegan, but was secretly eating the most vile big ass burgers possible because I was like on Adderall moving throughout the day, zooming, not eating. Then I'd be done, get into like a chaotic rut, just being super hangry. And it's like, I guess I'm just gonna treat myself with something that will barely taste good because I'm, just scarfing it down. Um, and certainly doesn't feel good during or after. Um, Alienated from my ancestors and from my communities, just like feeling super alone. I wasn't hanging out with anyone. It was just the work, just the work, just the work, just organizing. Before we're talking about organizing, I barely gave a shit. Um, and alienated from nature. I still think about, even though I was like driving back and forth to this town, I like didn't pay attention to the leaves as they would be changing. Um, or the river that's literally a 2-minute walk out front of my house, the Susquehanna River, one of the oldest rivers in the country, older than flowers. This river was around before flowers existed on this planet. Um, and just walking up to it and looking at it is just so incredibly healing for an otherwise difficult existence. Um, and finally, something that I see is just like a core wound here, along with, a few of these may also be seen as core wounds. It's like I was really alienated from the sacred, from God. That's something that the right wingers in Lancaster County were connected to, not me. Um, that was a thing that the Buddhist sanghas that I tried to join, um, they were connected to the sacred, and they didn't give a shit about political liberation, and it didn't seem like it had any sort of connection. So I distanced myself from it. And as I got more and more connected to the divine, and developing a relationship to religious practice, and study, I felt this like anger well up in me because of all of the things that empire and capitalism took away from me, took away from us. They took away God from me. They took they gave me a white Christ of colonizers and imperialists, who demanded submission, who didn't see me as I am, as like a member of the kingdom of God. Um, and the fact that, spiritual practice saved my life in no uncertain sense, that made me real angry. It's like I could have been doing this all along. But thankfully, I had this road back home. And one thing that I sort of realized is, like, as I was organizing, I thought I didn't have time for this woo-woo stuff, for practice, for like looking at the river, for hell, for even like enjoying myself. I truly thought that, like, well, no, the things that are making my life hard, um, is, the culture of scarcity and material reality of scarcity under capitalism. How I don't have access to the resources I need, and those in my community don't. We're robbed continuously by the ruling class. Um, and that would only change if we change the structures. And that's the only answer, and nothing else is worth doing because that stuff will still, come up. But I realized what I was doing is I was essentially telling myself, like, oh, you can't be happy until you win the revolution. Um, which is so incredibly like distant. Like I wasn't any closer to like winning those radical changes, that I was thinking of, right? Like, and I wouldn't have been able to survive any longer, trying to just fight in the same way that I was, without finding ways to support myself, to care for myself. I think about that Lord quote about, the radical act of self-care, just so like brutally misused, all the time now, right? Brought in this like consumerist, consumptive model of self-care that is just really decadent, um, and consumerist. But for me, it's really just like, you need to clean your gun if you're going to shoot it. You need to reload it. You need your troops to rest if they are going to defend or attack. If they're going to do any of this, there needs to be rest and restoration and rejuvenation. Um, and I had this idea that, like, okay, well, we need to do things differently. We need to take care of one another, and really, we need to be doing all of this work collectively. The way that was manifesting through me was, I was trying to care for everyone else around me, doing things for them, trying to fix things for them. Not really teaching and leading, but not just guiding people by the hand, but putting them right on my shoulders, a million people, and then growing in bitterness and resentment as no one was doing that for me. because nobody was overstepping their bounds and putting their hands all in my stuff like I was doing. I realized that I had a really vulgar elementary idea of like interdependence and what that means. Um, and what I started coming back to is just the importance of the individual, of myself as an individual, of restoring a sense of individualism that is disconnected from the bootstrapping, masculine, cowboy roots within our culture. An individualism that just names like, oh, like just like like nobody's gonna like sleep for me, nobody's going to practice for me, just like I couldn't do other people's like phone calls for them or develop other people's leadership for them. There's just some work that I had to do and I had to take care of, wounds that I had to address. um, and I was really using the work itself to bypass dealing with these scary things inside of me, my depression, my anxiety, my mania, my alienation. um, I wasn't healing these disconnections, and I was avoiding them at all costs through the political work. But as it turns out, I wasn't going to be able to continue the political work without really addressing these needs. And at the end of the day, these manifested as like massive organizational problems, as I mentioned before, like the ways that I wasn't the one overwork. I wasn't the only one overworking. Um, I wasn't the only one who was like reacting all the time to what Trump was bringing down instead of really building out our program patiently. Um, Everything was super high stakes, and it burnt everyone the hell out. Um, and our efforts, um, just hit obstacle after obstacle. Um, and the way I see it, just like because we're just wrestling with these deep wounds of alienation, of separation, these sorts of traumas. Because it's like really, really hard. This is the thing I would like run into all the time, how hard it is for people to ask someone they know, they love, and trust to join them at an action, to join them at knocking doors, to help send some text with them, to be like, hey, I really care about this thing and it affects my life and your life. I know you care about this. I love you. Can you do this with me? That was even harder for people to do with people that they knew than it was for people that like they would just meet at the door. um, People being so afraid to connect and move in solidarity, people so afraid of engaging in healthy conflict and tension, um, that you run into in organizing, that you run into as you try to develop plans around really meaningful things, kept just running up against this wall of our unmanaged woundedness. Um, And that's none of our faults, but I think it's ultimately it's our responsibilities. It's my responsibility to, my teacher Lama Owens. He says this: if I don't do my work, I become work for other people. Um, and just trying to do what's possible on like the individual level, on this deep spiritual level for healing and working towards liberation, in concert with the work of collective political liberation, where we are bringing other people together, asking them to do it, and all of these different things. Um, Let me think. Yeah, and yeah, and I guess just before moving forward, just naming some of the other things that were just coming up, this like need for validation, fear of being disliked in the work, which like I was fine with like certain politicians not liking me, but with others within my group, not so much. Perfectionism being totally toxic, sort of, you may have heard like this white supremacist trait. Everything has to be perfect, as if it came out of eugenicist laboratory, as opposed to out of the like hard won work of regular people living in reality. And so, and this all came really came to a head, as I mentioned, the pandemic. But in reflecting during the beginnings of the pandemic, there's just this realization that's like, oh, the things I've been doing before haven't been effective. They're not effective now, and conditions here and in my life in particular aren't even that bad yet. Aren't even as bad as we know that they're going to be. Aren't even as bad as they have been in the past. For my enslaved ancestors, for my ancestors who survived and persisted through colonization and imperialism, for how bad they are in other parts of the world, outside of um, the imperial core of the West of the United States. Um, and so, for me, spiritual practice um, is really all about the work of reconnection, reconnecting to myself, to the earth, to my communities, to my ancestors, and noticing the alienation, noticing the ways that I haven't sort of cleaned up my room, once I turn to look into myself and see how many things are bouncing around in there. And if you've ever tried sitting in, with breath practice before, zazen, and just, all right, just like try to follow your breath, just noticing when it goes in, when it goes out. You'll notice that you have a million things popping up, and some of it may be really unpleasant, some things that maybe think about every day as these latent anxieties, or ones that you're like, where did that come from? I haven't thought about that in forever. Like, and this is really terrifying and uncomfortable. And religious practice is about, spiritual practice is about having a container um, to confront these things and let them sort of burn away and transform, instead of always being caught inside of our heads trying to do the work of discursive thought to tease out all of these knots, and instead inhabiting stillness and intimacy and presence with these things that hold us back, that harm us, that so often take the wheel in our lives and cause us to be reactive, unstrategic, harmful, toxic. Um, and instead just be like, okay, you're there. You're there. Giving enough space for it to wither away. And if not, you know, to stop grabbing the wheel and instead be relegated to maybe a backseat driver that you can tune out. Maybe not being in the car at all. And in doing this, and I want to get to questions soon. My time management wasn't as sharp as I wanted, but this is like sort of the more like prescriptive part, which requires sort of depth and clarity that's really hard to get at, as it turns out. But it's also about developing compassion and wisdom, which I think are really core to organizing and developing a movement and building community that's willing to fight for radical change, to fight for its own dignity. Um, Compassion, so we can just be in relationship with one another, so we can um, have some firmness and steadiness when we see ugly things come out of people's mouths, or ugly things happen in the world, and just treat them with a sense of ease, with the wisdom knowing that like the stuff comes from someplace, structural factors, that influence folks, mold folks into thinking a certain way, and really to stop us from being that person who becomes bitter and resentful and is just like, look how hard our lives are. Isn't it obvious? And you're not doing anything about it. I keep trying to get you guys to the march, to the rally, and I guess my neighbors just don't give a shit. And then end up like I think a lot of us, have been, or we know these people, that sort of loud but powerless radical who is lecturing and wagging your finger at the very like base of people in your community that you should be building deep community with, being in relationship with, to fight for dignity. And yeah, I guess to close, a thing to name here that I think is really important, is that, I see this as helping us developing a sort of flexibility and clarity and resilience, that we're going to need in the coming years, as we face climate collapse, mass movements of people, increased rise of fascism. We're going to need to learn how to take care of each other and how to stay steady when we're going to be facing challenges far more intense than what Trump introduced in 2016. We're going to have to be able to keep up that energy even when someone like Biden is in office, and isn't as explicitly evil, but is still, doing so many different evil things. Um, and we are going to have to practice this praxis of theory and practice, or practice and action, of this dialectic of internal work and external work. Healing seeing healing is not just work of the individual on like a meditation cushion, or prayer at a pew, or walking by the river, but also in connecting with others to heal the harms that we've experienced, building community to fight together. And a caveat is, like, I'm not a great example of carrying all of these things. Um, I've been a maximalist. I had a job as a community organizer because I didn't know how to just work and do it on the side. Devoted my life to it. I'm going to seminary. I'm not just a person I'm becoming a chaplain. I'm not just a person who's working a job and joining a sangha and meditating with them every now and then. I'm in this deep period of formation, but I get really um, antsy sometimes and feel my shame creep up. I'm not doing enough. I'm not active right now, even though I know that right now this period is necessary for me to get to where I want to, where I can balance these different elements of the internal and external work. And there's new forms of loneliness too, as I like shift around my reactivity and sort of get confused when people are dealing with like very everyday normal frustrations that they take out on maybe the wrong targets, but it's just a part of life for most of us, and I need to rein myself in sometimes, and honor those experiences instead of just being wigged out, or never try to lecture anyone on it, God forbid. Um, so yeah, little bit of my scattershot roller coaster tale that I hope cohered into a little something for y'all, about how, yeah, loneliness, alienation creates these deep wounds. They come from a place within our society, and they keep us from doing the real work to fight and build community and organize, and to get the plan together. But we can't abandon that work just to work on the individual, personal, spiritual level. I think we need to carry both, as challenging as it may be. So, yeah, thank you all so much. Ember can turn off the recording. Um,
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Like you said, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording. If you watched this later on YouTube, thanks for joining us there.